start off by introducing a concept, a worldly concept that some of y'all may be very knowledgeable about, and maybe you haven't heard anything about it, and you're saying, what are these words you're using? So it's the concept of conceal carry versus open carry. Okay, it has to do with holding a firearm on your person, right? So if I am concealing, okay, if I am conceal carrying, that means you might look at me and you don't even realize it, but I might be, carrying a pistol. I'm not, okay? But that's the idea of you're trying to conceal, and they allow you, if you get a permit in the state of Arkansas, to carry on your person a pistol concealed, right? If you get the permit, it's legal. There's also what's called open carry. That's what a police officer does, and it's also actually legal in the state of Arkansas. Seems unbelievable that they recently made some rulings on that, where you have to get a permit to conceal it, but I could walk around through the streets here in Painter and have a pistol just on my side, visible for everyone, and as long as I am not carrying that around to do harm, that's actually legal. Maybe kind of hard to believe, and you may not understand the laws. It seems like almost like that's backwards. But the advantage is actually to the person that conceals the weapon, right? If you walk into a bank and the person who's trying to rob it is there to steal and to stop anyone who's going to stop him, and he sees the person over there with a gun on his side, well, who's he going to shoot first? The person with a gun, right? But if it's concealed, he doesn't know it's there. So the advantage is really to the person who conceals. Okay, but in all actuality, we're here in church, and I don't care about guns and asking you about that, so I'm going to get off that entirely. But here's the analogy and the question I would like to ask you. I've got two questions for you this morning. First, how do you carry your faith? And you may think, okay, I guess the main text for this morning is Matthew 5:14. It says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men." So you may think, I asked the question, Hunter, as Christians, how ought we to carry our faith? And you're saying, well, we need to open carry. That's not what I asked. I didn't ask how should Christians carry their faith. I asked, how do you carry your faith? This is personal. This is something that you need to think about. Not, well, I know Sister so-and-so across the aisle. I know how she carries her faith. I don't care about that. I care about you. So you need to think about you. So that's the first question. The second question will be based on, first of all, I need to back this up and think about, okay, why does somebody carry a gun? Why would we allow that, and why would we have people that want to carry a gun around on their person? Well, there could be multiple reasons. They want to look cool. Okay, that would probably be a vain reason for doing that. But the real correct reason should be that in bad situations that come along, who's prepared? Because if you don't have a gun, what's the first thing you're going to do when that bad situation comes? 911, please send someone with a gun. But if you already have one, you're ready, right? So we carry a gun for that situation. So here's my second question I want to ask. When the tough times, the tough situations in your life meet you face to face head on, are you prepared to use that faith? Because it doesn't make any sense in the world for you to carry around that gun and then someone comes up and they're going to shoot someone and harm them or rob them, and you just go, well, I have this gun here, but I just carry around that to look cool. Are you prepared to use it when the time comes? That's something we need to think about. And so that's my second question. When that tough time comes to you in your life, are you prepared to use that faith? So a couple examples I want to make based on those questions. So the first one was, how do you carry your faith? Matthew chapter 3, verse 7, we can see very quickly John the Baptist sets us this example. He's out there on the river. People are coming to him left and right, flocking to him, all types of people. But the important ones of the day, as they thought of themselves, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders, came out there to him. They were coming to his baptism. And you know what the first thing he said to them? He said, "Brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Therefore bear fruits worthy of repentance." He was prepared early and often to share with them the faith that he had. And he was willing to express that to them in not exactly the nicest way possible. Like, would you please, sir, just come over here and, become part of my faith? Is that how he brought that up? I mean, we talk about a hellfire and brimstone message. Y'all heard that phrase, right? I don't think any of us have ever gotten up here and yelled out to our crowd, "You bunch of snakes." I don't know that that's happened. And yet John the Baptist was willing to say such a thing that was going to incriminate himself. It was going to put him in a bad light with them. They probably, guess what? They probably don't like him anymore. And yet he said it anyways. He wasn't scared of that situation. So how did he carry his faith? He carried it openly and ready to be shared and seen by all. Have y'all ever seen someone open carry? I have before. I've seen it in the Searcy Walmart. And a guy actually was double carried on both sides, pistols on both sides, and he wasn't like a police officer. And I took a double take, right? When we see someone doing that, it kind of opens our eyes a little bit, like, whoa, that guy's carrying a gun, right? And it definitely draws us in when someone does that. And so it depends on what reaction you're trying to go for as to how you might want to carry, right? And the whole point of Conceal, what reaction are you going for the people around you? You're going for no reaction. You're trying to say, I hope that they don't see this. I hope it's tucked away and it's not, showing in any way, right? Sometimes we're out there doing that with our faith. Well, I hope nobody sees this, and I got to make sure it's covered up and concealed. And that's clearly not what was going on here with John the Baptist. Another situation where this came into play was Acts chapter 7, verse 51. This is Stephen addressing the council. He's known as the first Christian martyr. And just to give you a heads up, he did not do it by concealing his faith. He did it by carrying it openly. So this is how he addressed his crowd, the people that he was talking to. He's about as harsh, or maybe harsher, than John the Baptist was. He says, "You stiff-necked and uncircumcised in hearts and ears. You always resist the Holy Spirit, as your fathers did, so do you." And as we know, they later rushed at him and they stoned him. He was willing to say such a comment to a group of people who had the power to do what they did. What better time to conceal your faith than that moment right there, so that you can preserve your life, right? But he didn't. Not even in that moment did he choose to conceal his faith. He was ready to share it and put it out there openly, even though I'm not so sure it was received in the way that we want our faith to be received. We want people to receive it and share it with us, right? That's the whole purpose of sharing with them. But he had the message that he had to say. He said it, and he died for it. But he did what was right in the eyes of God. So, maybe we don't always face the same situation, but that example is there for us. So, how does this apply to our evangelism out there in the world? You might be thinking, you're looking around at our church family here, and you're saying, it's great here, right? Do people not love other people here? Do we not have the Spirit of God in us? Do we not have love and mercy and grace? We do. And so I'm looking around this place and I'm saying, why are people not lining up to flood these halls and join us? We're asking ourselves that question. I think that's an okay question, right? I think it's a true question that we can ask. But people don't know what we have here because many in the faith are concealed carrying their faith. They are not openly sharing. Now, I don't think it's always the best strategy to walk up and shout terrible things at people. They had their situations because they've been told and been told and been told and been told what was right. And that was the situation that they were in. That maybe is not your first line to those who are unbelieving. Okay, maybe it might be a little more gentle. I guess that's up to you. Especially when we think maybe of sharing it with younger people who haven't had time to, see the world and think about whether or not they have that same belief. But I'm talking about those people in your life who you've talked to them about the faith, you've tried a couple different approaches. How far are you willing to go? Are you going to go so far as to make them look you in the eye and tell you, no, I will not join you in your faith? I mean, it sounds like it might be a difficult situation. It sounds like it might take some guts. It sounds like they might hate you in the end, maybe. But how far are you willing to go? How openly are you going to share this faith? Because the first time it doesn't go your way, are you going to conceal it? I hope not. With John the Baptist and with Stephen, their faith walked into the room before they did. That's how openly it was carried. And I think they set a great example for us. And so as we look around and we wonder, why are people not flooding into these halls? We've got to go and address them. We've got to go get in their life, and probably in an uncomfortable way. An example for question number 2, when that tough time comes, are you prepared to use that faith? I think that those first 2 examples probably fit that scenario. That was a tough time in Stephen's life, but I have another example here. Matthew chapter 26, verse 46. This is an example of Jesus. The toughest time in his life is at hand. He's about to head towards the cross. He knows that. He has the foreknowledge in his mind of what's going to happen. And yet, what does he say in verse 46? Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. He did not run from them, but he went head on towards his betrayer. He also says, let's go ahead and keep reading that passage, verse 47. While he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Wouldn't you already say that this is a difficult situation that's going to require faith? I would say so. Verse 48, now his betrayer had given them a sign saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him. Immediately he went up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, "Friend, why have you come?" They came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear. Now you might be thinking, okay, this apostle that's here with Jesus, he's ready. He's carrying that faith. He's ready to go with Jesus, right? Because he's fighting. But Jesus said to him, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you not think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he'll provide me with more than 12 legions of angels?" Jesus had the power to avoid that situation, but the thing that stood higher up than that power was his faith in what needed to be done. Verse 54, "How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen thus? In that hour Jesus said to the multitudes, 'Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me.' But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Verse 56, the end of the passage. I want you to look at what's written there. "Then all the disciples forsook him and fled." So when the tough time comes, were they prepared to use their faith? Were they prepared to openly carry that faith? "Then all the disciples forsook him and fled." How are you going to react in your situations of life? It may be in that you need to stand up and show your faith. It might also just be trials and tough things that come into your life that are wearing you down, and you're going to wonder, how do I answer to this? What's my strength? How am I going to make it through this situation? Are you going to pull out your faith? Or are you going to leave it tucked away? How are you going to use it? That's something that we need to answer. When the tough got going, or the going got tough, they got going, right? We use that phrase, but where were they going? The other direction. Which direction are we going in? And so we have these examples of faith that I think are easily applicable in our lives. We may not be standing before a crowd of Pharisees and Sadducees. We may not be standing before those who have swords and clubs. I don't think I've really been in that situation to stand up for my faith in that way. But aren't we standing in front of neighbors, friends, those in the community that do not have an essential faith that they need to have? Have we brought it to them and made them look at it? Forced them to see what we see? We can't force anyone, right? We don't want to. This is not the Crusades where we go in and take a sword to them and say, "You must obey." That's not what we're about. But have you even tried to share that faith with them? Have you forced that conversation that needs to happen? I hope that this will give you a strong encouragement to do so, because they set an example. They were willing to do it on their life. Are you willing to do it just because you know it needs to be done? You might lose a friend. That's probably, you might take a cussing, you might lose a friend. That's probably the worst that we're going to deal with. How are you going to carry your faith? As I close this out, there's a couple things we need to think about. Sometimes it's going to feel like a silly weapon, right? Sometimes faith, it's like, well, I'd rather have a 45, right? Maybe if someone's coming in your house, you wish, we could have had the Bible study, but right now they've surpassed that. They've skipped the Bible study. Maybe I'll get the chance later, but I'm going to use the gun, right? But sometimes out there in the world, this weapon of faith feels like a silly weapon. I can't imagine those who were trying to tear down the walls of Jericho, right? We've heard that example. What do they normally do to tear down walls in those days, right? We get a battering ram, and we knock that sucker down. That's what they normally do. What do they still use today to bust down? What do the police use to bust down doors? They take that thing and knock it down. And yet God said, oh, no. You're going to march around with trumpets and just play on your little musical instruments. And that's going to be how you knock the walls down. You think, no, that's silly. That ain't going to work. That's weak and that's silly. That's what we're thinking. That's what the world's thinking about this faith. How do you feel about it? Do you think it's probably the best weapon that we have? Because it worked for them when they tore down those walls of Jericho. That's the same gift and the same thing that we have in us. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal or fleshly, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. We have something. We have a weapon here. Faith. The Word of God. We have those weapons that are strong enough to tear down strongholds. Just like it tore down those walls of Jericho. Sometimes I fear we've built too much of a stronghold here in this building that people feel like, oh, I can't go in there, I'm too much of a sinner. Or I can't go in there, I mean, those people are people of faith and I'm not. I can't be a part of that. I fear that they look at this place as a stronghold that they don't even know how to enter. That's not, we've got to reverse that. We're never asked to do that. We're asked to go out and tear down their stronghold because they're building it up around their life. They're building up a stronghold against us because they're afraid of how this works. They're afraid of submitting and giving their life to God. But they don't know how that's going to work. They don't even know yet that that's something that they desire and would be better off for. God is giving us free reign. He's saying, you carry that gun. Openly carry it. Go out and tear down that stronghold. How often does the Bible advocate for tearing stuff down and going in and being, a little bit malicious towards something? Not very often. Obviously, this was not in a physical sense, right? When Peter struck the person's ear as they came to steal Jesus, that wasn't the right approach. But we've been given something powerful to tear down strongholds. We get to rip them down. And so, that's what we need to do. That's what we've got to go out there, openly carry our faith. I don't know how you've been doing it up to this point. That's why I asked the question for you to think about. I hope that you continue to think about it. But I know we know how we ought to carry it. It's probably not going to be like that, how we change it, but we're going to have to build up and ask God to help us. Give us that spirit of courage where we're not worried about anything out there where we don't need to conceal. We have no reason to conceal. And when those tough times come, we hope that we're ready to use that faith. If you need anything at all, we hope that you come forward and stand as we together sing.